Hello and welcome to my first episode of Plant Problems. In these videos we're going to talk about certain houseplant traits when they're trying to adapt to your new home environments. So we're going to talk about stem problems, we could talk about soil, pests, flowers, how to keep flowers on, when to water, when not to water, and in this video we're going to talk about foliages. Plant number one, let's start off with the tallest one. This is called your Rathodora tetrasperma, also known as your mini cheese plant or mini monstera. And if you was to look closely, you can see in between the larger leaves there are some stunted growth. Now this was due to me buying this plant around Christmas time when it was about this height and it had signs of new growth. And I thought to myself how exciting that was going to be, because since when do we get active growth? During the autumn winter time when plants should be in their dormancy. However, it took at least a month for these leaves to come through, and they were really badly stunted because when it comes to winter time the daylight hours get shortened, so there's not enough light, so therefore your plant can't photosynthesize and you can't water your plant or feed your plant around that time because it's only going to rot and it's going to cause problems even more. So when you have leaves like this, that's purely because of stunt growth. You can get this with any plant. You can get it with marantas, you can get it with calatheas, peperomias I've seen it in. So just try to make sure that your plant goes into dormancy and don't really water it or feed it at all. Our Rathodora is showing signs now of slowing down. You can see now this leaf here is not as big as the others. So I'm going to ease off feeding and start slowly not watering this plant as much, and hope for the best that I don't get any more stunted leaves. I kind of kept them because I felt like they fill it out a little bit more. It's not the end of the world, it's not going to harm the plant. It's just, I don't feel like it's a need to cut them off. They're not infected or diseased or anything. Plant number two, this is your Scindapsus pictus silverian, also known as your devil's ivy. Some people call it pothos, but I think that's just more of an American term of calling it. So what's wrong with this plant? You're looking at it thinking there's nothing absolutely wrong with it. But let's zoom in a bit more on the foliages, because this plant, they can tell us a lot from what they need through the leaves. When we look out for our Scindapsus, we can see clearly that the leaves are curling up. So this could mean a number of things. It could mean that your plant is getting too much of a cold draft, or it's had too much fertilizer, or it had too much heat. And it can also mean that it's sort of a bit dry. Now, I know for sure that I have not fertilised this plant, because if you was to fertilise it, it will go absolutely crazy. I know for sure that it's quite dry, purely because if I look at my soil, how dry that is, it's like dust. So this plant is telling me that it needs water. It's closing up and it's saying like it's conserving its energy, its moisture levels. So in the new growth, it's putting all that moisture in the new growth because they're flat. However, when you move up to the older leaves, you can see here the differences. So this plant really needs water as soon as possible, and when I water my house plants, especially plants that are prone to stem rot, I water from the bottom up, so I let them take all the water they need from the bottom of the roots. Scindapsus are great plants because they can tolerate dry conditions as well as wet conditions. So not only do they purify the air, but they're just great to have. They're really easy to propagate and they can tell you a lot by their leaves. So I know when it needs fertilising, I know when it needs watering, and I know when it's had too much water. So it's a good way of getting to know your plants. And I have so many Scindapsus that it's quite easy now to tell when it does need watering. Plant number three, this is your Maranta lacunura, also known as your prayer plant. This is probably one of my favourite house plants. I remember when I was young, this used to be the most common houseplant that you can get on the market, and you're probably looking at this plant already thinking what is wrong with it. There's really not much wrong with it, but it's the smallest details and its most common problem in keeping marantas. And let's just zoom in on it just to find out what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if you can see it from here, but on some of the older leaves we've got some brown tips here, and this is quite common on marantas, even calatheas too. So this basically means it's overwatering, underwatering, it can be too much fertiliser, it could be low humidity. So I know for sure that the humidity levels in my plants are fine, they're grouped together, so it's over 40%, and the Maranta itself is in a self-watering system pot, which can last at least a month without me watering it. So when I fertilised this plant about 2 months ago, this is when I noticed it started getting these brown tips. So what I've done, I've over fertilised it, or it's been sitting in the water with the fertilisation inside it, and that's what's happened because there's nothing for the water to evaporate. It's still in this plastic container, so the plant's going to have to soak it all up. So now I've flushed the plant, I've allowed it to dry in between waterings, and I've stopped with the fertilising. I don't know why I fertilised my plant, I guess because I saw some active growth and I decided that it was the right time. I think Marantas and Calatheas are quite sensitive to the fertilisers. There's a lot of salt build-ups, and that's basically what's happened here. Another thing that's quite commonly known in Marantas, the older leaves are the ones that tend to get affected. When I say affected, I mean dead, dying, because they are the older leaves. So when this happens, you want to chop them above a node. If you chop them below the node, you're not going to get any more new growth. It's sort of going to encourage growth from the centre, from the base of the mother plant, where you want to encourage it from the stem to create a much more bushier plant. And you can see here where I've done this method before. So that's where the old leaf used to be, and here's the new shoot. Here's another one that I've done recently. So this is going to become a much more bushier and happier plant. So don't worry too much if the older leaves start dying, that's totally normal. Plant number 4. This is your sanseveriamoonshine, also known as your snake plant or mother-in-law's tongue. I know this plant purely as a snake plant for their patterning, but new cultivars like this moonshine, where it's platinum all the way through and no shines of patterning, it looks like a mother-in-law's tongue. Not that I've looked into a mother-in-law's tongue before. Recently I had a few customers at work saying why their sanseverias are getting really stretched and tall. And that's because with sanseverias, they make great dark room plants. And when I questioned this to them, they all admitted that their plants are not in very bright rooms. And that's very much what's happened to mine. You can see here the new leaf. This is the only leaf it's had this year, and it's just continued to grow longer. So what the plant is telling you is saying that it's reaching out for more light, so it's going to stretch taller. Because our plants are in shade or a darkish room, they don't require much watering or fertilising. So let's focus on a point where it needs watering. I'm not sure if you can see, but when sanseverias need water, you can see here the wrinkleness in the outer and inside of the leaves. Also here, there's some wrinkles here. That's trying to conserve its moisture from the base. So this is a good sign that your plant needs watering. I haven't watered my sanseveria for a month, so I think it can appreciate a water. This is plant number 5. We're now coming to the end. This is a Calathea misto. There's no other common name for this plant. I know them as Calatheas. So with this plant, it's related to the Maranta family because it sort of unfolds and folds during the day and night to conserve its moisture. So with this plant here, if we zoom in, some dead, dying leaves. Now we don't have a problem in the newer upper leaves, maybe with some dry tips or brown tips as you like to call them from the humidity. So we're just going to focus on the brown leaves. There's a lot of old leaves here, so we're just going to simply just chop them off. And you'd be surprised every time you chop these dead old leaves off, your your Calathea will start producing more growth. You can see already how that's starting to look neat. So we're just going to continue to chop all these dead and dying leaves. So I've just gone and removed the dead and dying old leaves, and you can see already how much better that plant looks. Here are the leaves. I've got some dead, dying old leaves, and I've got some really dead, crunchy leaves. And I just chopped them as close to the base as I could. This is really going to help stimulate more leaf growth. So let's talk about why the plant's already folded up. It's not even evening yet and the plant's already folded up. This plant is already telling me that it's a bit dry, and by looking at the pot now, this is how bad of a Calathea owner I have been. Look how dry that soil is. It's dry from the bottom. That's how bad it needs more water. And just to prove a point, it's like dust. So it could do with water as soon as possible. And then eventually this plant will start opening up. Thank you so much for watching this video of plant problems. I'm going to start doing more of this. I think it's a good way of just focusing on one certain topic, because if we start talking about everything, I think the audience that are new to houseplant keeping are just going to get lost. So in my stories I do let you guys vote what you want to see and what you want to watch, and that's the best way for me to interact with you guys to make sure you don't end up killing your plants and that you learn from what I'm trying to teach you. Really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, please follow, like and share, and I hope to see you again. Take care.